And the inaugural edition of Africa Communications Week kicks off in Johannesburg, and as part of Africa Month celebrations, the conference aims to encourage communication for the continent's development. And Afro Worldview reporter Sipha Khema filed this report, and we'll also have a chat with her very briefly.
Communications experts believe they have a huge role to play in building brand Africa. This emerged as they gathered at Africa Communications Week in Johannesburg.
The point of Comms Week is to look at how do we as communicators, as creators of content, contribute to building brand Africa. How do we take ownership of our contribution around that? So the campaign is around us saying it's our Africa, it's our story to tell, let us tell the world.
This year's theme for Africa Communication Week focuses on economic integration. One expert believes the mainstream media should understand the impact of storytelling.
It is very important to diversify the narratives, avoid having only one story, one narrative created by one platform or the mainstream media. What I'm inviting through this presentation is, or highlighting in this presentation, is the importance of storytelling. What storytelling can allow us or can enforce communities to give other perspectives.
Government wants to ensure all South Africans are part of the narrative.
Most importantly, to encourage citizens to be the ones who gives the narrative. And that's why the president of this country today carries on with the same message that he started with the NDP, and saying that let South Africans be active, let South African citizenry be informed. Tumamina, there's so many South Africans today that says, where do I go, Mr. President? What narrative do I participate in? Do I participate in the narrative of service delivery? Do I participate in the narrative or anti-corruption?
Africa Communications Week continues with its next lecture in Cape Town on the 25th of May 2018. Minister of Communications Nomvula Mokonyane will be the guest speaker. Sipha Khema, Afro Worldview, Johannesburg.
Africa Day, formerly known as African Freedom Day, is the annual commemoration of the foundation of the Organization of African Unity, or the OAU, on the 25th of May 1963. And the significance of the African Union anniversary will be celebrated in various parts of the world. And joining us live from the newsroom is Afro Worldview reporter Sipha Khema, who was there with the launch of the inaugural Africa Communications Week. Sipha, thank you so much for joining us. In your view, I mean, what is the objective of this, and considering that 55 years on, why are we only seeing a communications week focused on African issues?
Thank you, Sandy. Well, African Week Communications has, as they said, it's actually been around, but this is the first time that there's much conversation around the topic. They do say that one of the main aims, actually, that they're looking for is to aim to contributing to a greater narrative in Africa. And it's time to start to brand Africa as a continent, and for countries to actually come together so that the communications sector comes together in Africa to ensure that brand Africa is seen in a positive light by other countries.
And of course, the challenges will be, if you like, the sovereignty of the African states and countries themselves in not necessarily having a universal African identity, unlike the EU, for example, or even the Americas, that we still have these geopolitical boundaries that doesn't allow for Africa to necessarily speak in a common voice. Are these some of the challenges?
Yes, it has been noted that these are some of the challenges. For example, as we know, former President of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, had said that the main issue with African countries is implementation. At the AU, problems are discussed, solutions are brought forward, but it's just implementing them and also agreeing on how they are implemented. So with Communications Week, they said, you know, as Africans, let's take it upon ourselves and not wait for our governments to take the initiative. Let's take initiatives as citizens ourselves and start branding our continent, and so that other continents and other countries, they can see Africa in a different light. And also, let's take back our own stories and start owning South African stories as well.
Yes, and I mean, that's been the cry in recent years, in the sense that African Renaissance, the appeal of being self-governed and self-sustained, all of those that were meant to have formed a united Africa. We know there's an announcement of an Afro currency, for example, but we still have the barriers of not only trade but movement of people as well, that in neighboring countries in SADC, for example, just going to Swaziland or Lesotho, which is a drive away, a couple of hours drive away, you still need a passport. I mean, has there been talk about how the trade or ease of trade will be managed around this Communications Week?
I know that besides Communications Week, I think the main topic that was a discussion at Communications Week was how to change the narrative and how Africa is seen. If you know as well, I mean, Africa, we depend a lot on also tourism, especially in South Africa, to contribute to the GDP. But with the free trade, as we know, President Ramaphosa did attend the summit where they discussed free trade in Africa, and nothing has been finalized or even confirmed as of yet. But I know that they are looking into ensuring that Africa becomes free around to move for fellow Africans.
Okay, and also the esoteric, I suppose, indigenous wisdom and knowledge in terms of, they spoke about storytelling and also documenting our rich cultural history. There is talk in South Africa that the Basic Education Minister may actually overhaul the history, at least that part of the curricula, that would reflect a more Afrocentric reality of what our past entails. Do you think this is significant in how we relate to our fellow African brothers and sisters?
Definitely. I think it would be a great idea, seeing as it will also help promote and raise awareness around South Africans so they know more of fellow Africans, because it would stop issues such as xenophobia from occurring here in South Africa, which is also one of the topics that were actually raised yesterday at the lecture, at the Communications Week lecture in Sandton, was that once Africans are aware of each other's cultures, then we will be able to have not tolerance but a better understanding of each other, and also to understand that mass media needs to understand that they have a bigger role to play in this, in ensuring that they understand the impact that stereotypes have and the narrative which they portray different cultures, ethnic groups. It actually plays a huge part in understanding, as well as their reaction from our other African brothers and sisters.
Yes, and I mean, as a young journalist, and especially being in South Africa, where one could say is the epitome of success. We know we're only the third biggest economy on the continent, with many other African countries being citing excellent results as well in terms of their agro-processing and business as well. Do you have a sense that at least young people would be the thrust that is required to at least unite the continent and hopefully also infiltrate the political leadership as well?
Yes, no, definitely. As a young journalist, I think being on the ground and hearing from young people as well, the youth of South Africa, is that, I think the youth have a better understanding because now we're living in a digital era and a digital world. So we are able to get to the information for ourselves. And I think because of that, then now we have a better understanding of different African cultures and different ethnic groups. So that would actually say it's up to us now to close the gap that was there between African countries, and to ensure that we are able to unite Africa and have one story to tell.
All right, just part of the program as well, as the week kicks off, because it often tends to be very strategic executive discussions in air-conditioned auditoriums, etc. How accessible is it to the greater Maasai and also to the larger South African or African population?
As you said that yesterday, that was actually one of the main points that were raised, is that such conversations are kept within a different group or class, if you may call it that, instead of taking it out to the people and ensuring that everyone in South Africa, or African continent actually, is part of the conversation, because majority of the issues and problems, they actually lie more in the rural areas, in South Africa, in the townships as well. So that's when the GCIS, they said the GCIS should come in South Africa, where they're able to communicate not just on a digital platform, but to ensure that the platform they communicate in is where they can involve and make all South Africans part of the conversation and part of the story. But to answer your question, no, it is not enough, because I mean it's being held in suburbs, in cities, bigger cities, larger cities. So they need to start reaching out to your rural areas. They need to start going out to the townships to ensure that they're also part of the conversations, and not just on social media, but take it back old school, because that's where a majority of our villages are as well. They're old school. So take it to the halls, make them part of the conversation, so that they can also gain a better understanding, and that also we also get an understanding of the issues and problems they have to deal with.
Joining us from the newsroom is Afro Worldview reporter Sipha Keme, and reporting on the launch of the Africa Communications Week. She's also a licensed pilot, mind you, and a new addition to Afro Worldview. But for now, though, we take a quick ad break, and we'll see you shortly.